Hey traders, it's Ryan from the Private Banker. Just going to do a recap for this amazing day on crude oil today, and just how I perceive today, and we'll go from there. So, starting off, obviously we had a holiday yesterday, so the best thing to do is just take out the holiday day out of the equation here, and just reference obviously Friday's trade, because Monday there was nothing really happened. So obviously the levels are to work with are from Friday. So going into today's open, I mean, we can already see here on the overnight Globex trade that we'd already seen an imbalance. I mean, we opened up above Friday's value, and we started to sell off through it, and into today's open. I mean, we opened up below value. So there's a few ways that we can view this, but I mean, with Friday being quite a large move up day, and obviously we're opening below value. So one thing off the open, the market's telling us that obviously we've seen a perception in price change, and we can see that there is an imbalance to the sell side going into the open, and we're trading below value. So I mean, there's two types of things we can look for here going into the day, depending on the developing value on the day and the current context from the macro to micro perspective timeframes. And obviously we can look for reversions to the mean, destination trade, back to the other side. So we just traded the range looking for continued rotation balance, or we can look at it as a perception in price has changed, and we trade with the order flow, the new order flow that we're seeing coming into the market here. And as you can see here, that we were very imbalanced into the open, and we see this two-way trade sort of come back in. But I mean, all we see was a pullback to the previous day's highs, and then into the open we basically just opened and sold straight off. So we had this selling tail straight off of the open. So if we look at this also on the daily time frames, we can see that it was basically just a gap down day here, and we see responsive selling off the open, and this was the move from Friday, and this was yesterday's trade, which I will rid of. And so with the moving averages, we basically opened below the 20 and we opened into the 5 exponential moving average here, and we see selling straight off the open. So I mean, that's just one clue that we're going to reject that previous day's range. We rejected yesterday Friday's range, and we've seen selling. So the market's already sort of given us a heads up that there is a possible imbalance to the sell side. If we look at just quickly touch base on some of the high time frame context here, we can see that we've just sold back into this week's value. I mean, we did open up in a bearish structure on the weekly, and obviously into the open we've seen this sell off straight back into this week. I mean, you can see the imbalance on the weekly, but you can see we sold straight back off into this week's value. So if we're looking to the buyer side here, what we wanted to see was rejection to the buyer side, and the market gone back into the developing value with rotations higher for further balance. But what we see here is the market come back into value, and we see sellers selling this. So once this comes back into value and we see acceptance with the developing value, then the obvious trade is the reversion to the mean and a destination trade to the other side of this value area, with the neutral market now coming into play on this context. If we look at the I'll just quickly look at the monthly here as well. You can see that last month we see a balance. Some of the month with rotations at the start of the month, we see the breakout, we see value getting pulled down, came down and tested these lower levels, and then into the month close we see basically a reversion to the mean and destination trade back up. And I already sort of had it on the cards for this to happen. I mean, they basically just smashed it up right into the month's end, and then they sold it all the way back down to where they were trading. So they got some nice business done here, ran some stops back out of the market, and sold it back down to where we've been trading for the last couple of weeks. So it's quite a bizarre and quite a cool process to see this happen. Regards watching the time frames playing out, so it's quite a cool observation there. If we do quickly touch base on the weekly TPOs as well, we can see that last week we put this very poor low in, and we were trading in this range that I said we've been trading in for the last couple of weeks, and into the week close we see this sort of spike higher, this gap higher, and we ran the stops out of the market. And if we look at this on the day time frame, you can see this, and you can see that the trading range that we were in, and what basically happened is we see buyers responsive and we see market makers doing whatever they're doing, but regardless how we look at this is all of the stops get run for this area. So anybody who got short in these areas here, their stops got hit above this sort of 94.70 high level, and we see a breakout. So this O gap overnight is liquidation of stops, and then we see people forced to cover into the month's end. And then what happens here? We come in, we opened up below the previous day's range, we see a go no go trade off the open, we see responsive sellers, and we see this huge sell off back all the way down to where we've been trading, all the way to the other side of this bracket. And if we do look at the weekly chart here, you can see that we basically just engulfed the whole of last week's range. I mean, so when we open up at the high of this week with this strong bullish close from last week, and we see sellers responsive off of the open, and we see this market come back into range, then the obvious destination is back to the low, which was 93s, and we did this all in one day, which was pretty amazing. But you can just see here how this played out today. This played out today here. I mean, on the composites, we opened up below the current Vwap. I mean, this is where we have been trading, and then last week we see the reversion back to these high levels where the Vwap is, and then this week we just opened up just below the Vwap, and then we've auctioned all the way back down to the current market extreme in this composite value area. Also very, very obviously interesting and a cool observation. Obviously on the 240 minutes, we just see this big smash down, but we do look at the volume composites. I mean, I was expecting possibly rotations back up, obviously runner stops possibly above this sort of 96.70 area, which would have lined up with this sort of trend line, whatever you want to call it, bearish channel, that would have been added context to this. But I mean, we just came in today and they've just smashed it all the way back down to where we've been trading now. So very, very crazy move today, very crazy move. Don't see ranges this big in crude oil that often. I mean, today in the pit session we traded 230 cent on this move down, and the whole entire Globex session was almost 300 ticks. So quite a big move down here. But anyway, so obviously going into the day time frame, with what we were seeing, I mean, you have two options. I mean, you're either looking to buy the previous lows, which would have been in this area here, with stops below this sort of 94.50, and looking for the market to come back into balance, which it started to try to do, and then obviously the trade would have been a destination trade back to the mean and the other side of value, of possibly targeting this previous day's Vwap. But as you can see here, the market came back in, and we just, when this happened, I mean, while I was watching it, the developer value was just falling. So even though we come in there, we're still selling inside of value here. So off the open, we obviously had responsive selling. We bounced off of some support, which was just the high of this bracket and that previous day's range. So we came back in, we tested 94.50s, and we bounced. You can see here we bounced at 94.50s. So off the open, they came in, they sold it away from value. The market's imbalanced. We come back in, and we just run a RTH Vwap here. You can see how the market came. You can see the selling imbalance came in, the market came back in for two-way trade, and you start to see people selling this 94.83, capping these highs. It's quite visible on the footprint here. You can see that we one time framed down the whole day, but on 2 seconds. So this was the selling off of the open. So we see the selling off the open, we see market makers, whatever happening, defending. We come in, we get more business done. We see two periods of nice selling coming into the market. So we see the sell off into this period, we see them buy it back up. Next period they sell it back down. You can see the order flow here, you can see the orders with these 400 prints all offering this market down. Market continues to one time frame, and then finally we see this breakout. All the stops get run, you can see all the stops getting hit here, and then we see the imbalance continue. But the point being here is off of the open we see that balanced two-way trade come back in, but it was just value catching up with price, and it was quite obvious to look, if you looked at it on this time frame, that value was going to push prices down. So you had a couple opportunities here. I mean, if you didn't sell the open, and then you had multiple chances to sell this. You had two periods to sell this. Off of the left and value area high, if you were referencing that, or you could have been it would have been hard if you weren't referencing this. I mean, I plot one over the other so I can see once the market's opened. Obviously into the open, the Globex session is most important, but obviously the RTH is just added context, which sometimes helps. But regardless, I mean, you basically were just looking to sell value here, and with stops above the current day mean and inside that previous day's value. Again, if you're looking to buy this for a mean reversion, if that was your trade plan today and you're looking for this to come back in for a destination trade, then the trade would have been either to buy here as we come back into value, or to buy these lows, and obviously the stop goes below this 94.50s, which was which was below the initial balance. I mean, already off of the open though, once we see this A period and the B period come in, we already had this poor low in play. So once we see this poor low in play like this, then obviously the direction comes to the sell side. We want to see until we break the high, then the probability is we're going to come back up and clean this low, because we've not finished an auction into the sell side. And if we do look at this, we can see that there was this sort of 3-4 period balance before we broke out. But I mean, you can just see we started the 1 time frame down here. Let me just adjust this. Yeah, I've got it on 3. If you got it on 5 TPO settings, on my weekly it did show that there was a low here in the B period. I'll just have this on a bit of a higher setting, but you can see that we were 1 time framing down, and D period we can see 1 time frame, and this is the period that broke out. We see the stops get run, then we just see this major imbalance continues. We continue to sell off for the rest of the day, but obviously the main heads up was coming back into the weekly value, and then we see a continuation of selling. So just another heads up, obviously, that the order flow is to the sell side, and just to trade with that, which is basically just sell value with stops inside value, and we want to see price lead value down and this imbalance continue. I mean, if you did miss these positions to the sell side, then it's quite hard to get short here. I mean, I don't personally like selling the 1.5 standard deviation, but when we do see these major imbalances occur, you can reference the 1.5 standard deviation here. So you did have 2 chances to get in here: stops inside that previous range or inside the breakout area, and then stops inside the developer value, as you do want to see the market come back into balance and into value now. And this is quite hard to do, and to be aggressive like that in these types of scenarios, but obviously, as you can see on days like today, in the correct context, it does make sense. And as you can see here, I mean, the market just basically 1 time frame down the whole day for the rest of the day here. Every single period it didn't take out the previous high, and yeah, it was just basically 1 time frame down a huge amount here today. And one other way to look at it is we just see basically selling back into this previous range. We want to come back into the previous range. Obviously, the expectation is for this not to happen in one day, but the expectation is for it to sell off back down to the lows for a destination trade. And we can sort of see on the volumes, on the Globex sort of session volume profiles that we have here, that I mean, we just opened inside this previous range. We auctioned down. We see this huge cluster of volume come in before the breakout, and it was just fairly obvious. I mean, at the time, that we were going to obviously rotate down to 94.50s, and then from there we could have seen 2-way trade buying. But I mean, the imbalance was so aggressive, and so the market was just so out of balance here that we just basically sold all the way down into this previous bracket, and we just sold all the way down and referenced the low of it. So obviously, everyone who got long here for the last couple of days has been wiped out here. And obviously, another interesting observation here is the fact that we had been 1 time framing up for how many days? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days. We came in off the open today and we broke out this 1 time framing. So what does this say? We had 2-way trade back into the market, and we expect a reversion back down to this lower balance area. So that's just another way to look at this here, and obviously to highlight the auction process on the day. So anyway, if you do have any questions about today and what I've run through here, then please do not hesitate to ask, and I will catch you all tomorrow. Take care and goodbye.